Well, I'm late to the party on this one. I feel like I'm showing up at 1:30 in the morning and everyone's already passed out. I finished my first time reading Dune earlier this month. I was never a crazy big reader of science fiction novels, but after discovering the Dune board game, I got enough into the universe to want to read the book, and I powered through the 600-page trade paperback in about a week. That's not to sound super smart or like I'm some kind of speed reader or anything. I'm willing to bet that that's pathetic compared to most people, but come on, give me some credit for actually picking up a book. So Dune is a great book. It's a lot of science fiction combined with environmental philosophy and a lot less straight up adventure storytelling than it feels like would be in a book that's going to be adapted into a big budget movie. But I really think Dune is the kind of science fiction story we need right now, because so much of the story is dug in deep in philosophy that is progressive and very modern, especially in the context of a story that presents itself as a very standard cookie-cutter white savior narrative, which it's not. Spoiler warning for both Dune and Dune Messiah here. So to start with Dune, it depicts a society with a profound divide between the aristocracy and the lower classes. The book basically never depicts the society the characters live in. Any depiction of an underclass is completely absent, with only a couple of exceptions. The first exception is the scene in which Paul, Duke Leto, Liet Kynes, and Gurney Halleck save spice workers from a worm attack, and the second is in the Fremen society. We're told that the most important substance in the known universe is the spice, and we can infer that the spice is rare enough that only the upper classes of society even have a chance at getting their hands on it. We know nothing about how anything else is powered in the universe. All we're told is that the spice must flow at literally any cost. That makes me ask the question, what are these people even ruling? They have wealth, sure, and they can keep a lot of people in their service, but really, are they ruling anything beyond the broken and barren ashes of multiple dead worlds? And they have armies, spies, mentats, all of this in service of maintaining the illusion of power and of the divine right to rule. When in reality, all that they're ruling is the last scraps of civilization clinging to dying worlds. There's oceans on Caladan, sure, but are there cities? Is Giedi Prime not just the Harkonnen and their slaves? Is Gamont not just a planetary version of Jeffrey Epstein's child sex island? Through all of this, the only thing that the Atreides, the Harkonnen, and the Corrinos can think about is treachery. They spend all of their time working out these grand designs and grabs for power of what little they can get their hands on. All they care about is the spice and stabbing each other in the back. This is a society where the people in power have failed the people that they were meant to help. As Liet Kynes says himself in the book, Arrakis could be in Eden if its rulers would look up from grubbing for spice. The Fremen are the kind of collectivist fringe group that could actually make a difference they need to. Instead of working through the insanity and backstabbing of chom politics, they set about the project of terraforming Arrakis themselves, with Kynes as their prophet. Kynes himself does not bring the Fremen out of a dark age and does not force them to get involved in imperial politics, and he especially does not make himself the savior of their people. He is in fact the Emperor's man on Arrakis, but he loses his life to the Harkonnens' treachery. In effect, the Harkonnen kill the personification of hope for the great houses ever doing something positive for the Fremen. And do I even need to point out the parallels between the politics of Dune's CHOAM and the modern political landscape? The fact that through the failing of the government to help the people of the universe, that these two great houses of the Landsraad are hell-bent on feuding and killing each other to the point where the common people are ignored in favor of the interests of big business? It couldn't map more perfectly if Frank Herbert wrote the book in 2020. I'll talk more about the David Lynch movie in a moment, but opening with the Spacing Guild's audience with the Emperor to establish that they're forcing the Emperor in the Harkonnens' hand into killing Duke Leto and destabilizing Arrakis is a good move for the adaptation. It shows us that the kind of world that these characters live in, that the interests of an explicit guild that controls all space travel and are even over and above the interests of the common people or even the interests of the Emperor. The Emperor himself seems really reluctant to do anything about the feud. He's correctly afraid that it will lead to the death of his house. All of this is juxtaposed with the Fremen culture and society that Paul Atreides joins and assimilates into, and how unlike any of the great houses it is, and how Paul's greatest failing is that he transforms the Fremen into one of the great houses. Paul falls into all the traps that his father managed to miss. Gurney makes that clear when he's taken aback by Paul's failure to care for the lives of his men in the final battles for Arrakeen. And it all adds up to Dune Messiah showing up after the original and showing everyone just how awful and nearly post-apocalyptic Muad'Dib's jihad has been towards literally everyone and everything around him. In one paragraph of Messiah, Paul compares himself to Genghis Khan and Hitler. He says, almost joking, "We'll be 100 generations recovering from Muad'Dib's jihad," and then laughs, saying, "I merely had a sudden vision of Emperor Hitler saying something similar." No doubt he did. And he's right. Paul is not the royal savior coming down from on high to bring the Fremen out of the darkness and into the light of imperialist and capitalist society. Paul himself laments that he destroyed his life and the life of all the Fremen around him by dragging them into global politics. Paul Muad'Dib has failed the Fremen. And I think that's mostly what the David Lynch adaptation of Dune is missing. Not to say that David Lynch didn't get the book. I really think Lynch came at it from a very different angle. The book tells a narrative that subverts and breaks down the white savior narrative and argues against the very society it depicts. And that's what makes it work for me in 2020. I think the film that Lynch made is a more straightforward adaptation of what the book seemed to present. Compare Dune as a story to the story of something like Star Wars. Star Wars is a story steeped in the cultural ideal where, when you map out the saga, it's 9 films of the same 2 or 3 great bloodlines going to war over the fate of the Force, which only certain people can even use, and the saga ends with 2 people who were both born exceptional saving the universe effectively against their corrupted relatives. In effect, Star Wars argues that it takes great people of high birth to protect the world, compared with Dune, a story about how feudal lords involved in breeding programs that span generations fuck everything up and destroy the very things that they intend to save. The film version of Dune mostly ignores this and tries to turn Dune into Star Wars. Not to say that the David Lynch movie was bad, I actually enjoyed the hell out of it, but Lynch might have been better served if he had looked at Dune and didn't try to turn Sting into Darth Vader. Which is why I think I'm excited for Denis Villeneuve's movie. In a post-Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and post-Avengers world, the idea of making Dune into 2 or even 3 movies is not insane, especially if they decide to make more of the series. I seriously think Messiah is a super important part of the saga. You have the story of Paul Atreides coming to the Fremen, and their prophecy leads them into following him, but Paul brings the Fremen people further and further into darkness the longer his rule as Emperor and Master of the Fremen lasts. The conspiracy against Paul doesn't even have the best actors in it, and especially the Bene Gesserit and the Bene Tleilax stand to gain a lot of power. It feels like they're extensions of the problem. They want power only because they don't have it, not to actually improve anyone's life, which makes them about as bad as Paul himself. They just want to reinstitute the old imperial bloodline and get the Bene Gesserit back at their Kwisatz Haderach, which Paul also royally fucked up. Dune is important because the first book tells a story that hints at a coming destruction at the hands of Emperor Paul Muad'Dib, but publishing Messiah as the second book depicts all of the failures of his empire laid bare. Imagine if Star Wars Episode 10 was a movie where Rey had failed miserably to keep the balance in the Force, and not only were there new Jedi, but also new Sith, and that the rest of the New Republic had fallen to ruin at the hands of her failure. I mean, Star Wars basically did that movie. It was called The Last Jedi, but diehard Star Wars fans hated it because it was a deconstruction. I was idly scrolling through Amazon reviews of Dune Messiah, and one jumped out at me. It reads, "In this book, our main protagonist can see the future. He spends the entire book refusing to do anything at all, apart from be sad about what is going to happen, because he can see that doing something to protect himself from the bad stuff that is coming will make it worse. No explanation other than he can see the future is ever offered for why acting in his own defense would make things worse. We spend the entire book waiting for the thing every character knows is coming to happen, but of course the audience is left in the dark about what is coming, and then not much happens." And something like that is, I think, why people didn't like about Last Jedi. The fact that it made the effort to show everyone that Luke Skywalker wasn't just going to show up and save the day, that they have to confront the fact that not every problem can be solved with more Jedi stuff. And Dune is the kind of story that exists to turn Star Wars on its head, despite being published nearly 10 years before Star Wars even existed. In an age where Star Wars is one of the most popular franchises ever, and in an age where superheroes dominate, Dune is a more important work than ever before, because saving the world can often go horribly, horribly wrong. So that's the Dune video. I hope y'all have been liking the more generalized media criticism. I'd say I'm having more fun just talking about what I'm thinking about rather than trying to force it into something trans related. Let me know what you think in the comments and drop a subscribe if you're new to the show.